And
Take three.
everybody's green.
All right, I think. All right, so I think we're finally unmuted. Hopefully everyone can hear us. We have just called our meeting to order and recited the Pledge of Allegiance. So our second item on the agenda is to review the RFPs with regards to the search and selection of our superintendent for 2022 and 2023 school year.
Yeah, so I've invited Director Ely here specifically because we issued a request for proposal or RFP. And there are certain public procurement requirements when we are going to expend this level of funds. And I just wanted her to briefly explain the legalities and why we have a rubric that was dictated in the RFP that was approved by the board, and why we need objective decision, come to an objective decision in that process. So I'll let you give a brief one.
Okay. So what you guys are doing is considered an intermediate procurement. And so there are a couple of ways that you can go about that. You can solicit quotes like over the phone, or you can do internet quotes, or you can actually issue an RFP, which is what you guys chose to do. When you issue an RFP and you have specific criteria in the RFP, you have to follow the criteria that you put in the RFP, because if you don't, you're creating an unfair environment. If you change that after you have submitted the RFP and then gotten your responses back, because whoever responded to you responded based on what was in the RFP. And so if you change that after the fact, then you are creating an unfair proposal environment. And then any of the proposers who are not successful would be able to take action against the district. You guys have questions about that?
So I think the process tonight, Sherry, I don't know if you want me to talk about this, or you want to just explain a little bit about what this form is and what our responsibilities are as a board as we fill these out after our discussion tonight, if you haven't already filled it out.
So each of you have, yes.
So before we go there, so because of the legalities you just mentioned, could we essentially say we're not choosing any and reissue the RFP if we chose?
Yes, you could do that. You could, the board could say, you know, we are not going to select anyone tonight and we're going to put this out for RFP again.
Okay.
If you guys do go ahead with that, once you've reviewed each of the proposals, you need to score them based on the rubric that you have, and you each need to score them individually. And after you've scored them, you will turn them into, I'm assuming, the board secretary, to Tanya, correct? And then she will compile those for you. And then you'll, whoever, based on the criteria that you have, whoever comes out with the highest score, that would be the company that you would ultimately select.
Debbie?
And so I noticed a couple points that were brought out by individual companies that I thought, that's a good question. Is this important or not? And I assume we could put those kinds of thoughts and insights into number 2, thoughtfulness and quality of the response. And so just because it wasn't something that each one of them addressed because it wasn't in the RFP, we still have some flexibility by going for something like that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Do we have an opportunity to discuss the proposals as a board before we score them?
Yeah.
Or we do? Okay.
Yes, definitely.
So I have just drafted a quick PowerPoint presentation, just listing some of the facts about each of the companies and just some of the highlights that are listed here, but really it's an opportunity for us to talk about each of the companies and ask questions or review things as a board. And each of us will need to score them. You'll see that a weight is given on each one of these questions. And so you, top score would obviously be, for example, the first one is weight of 30, you would give 30 if that's that company is top notch or whatever number under that. And then I'm assuming the top score could be 700, right? So we would just add up the scores, and whichever company scores the highest, then that's the company that would be selected by the board. Is that
That's
correct?
Yeah.
So why don't we get started, and I'll just run through this briefly. Again, I tried to keep this very generic just to give us a place to begin our discussions tonight. So Tanya, if you could go to the next slide.
Todd will be.
Oh, Todd, sorry. Thank you, Todd. So we received 4 proposals. I just put them in alphabetical order. The first was GR Recruiting. I noted that they were headquartered in Arizona and that they did list 2 individuals who we would be working with. The first is Dr. Christine McDuffie and the other is Dr. Darlene Schulte, I think. And it was noted that she does live in Medford, and so she is relatively close by. The second company was McPherson and Jacobson, and they're headquartered in Nebraska, and they proposed that we would work with Dr. Douglas Nelson. There's no relation there, and so please don't pick him just because of the last name. I don't want to be biased, but he lives in the Dells in Oregon, and so he is, I guess, relatively close, being that he's here in our state. OSBA responded. They, of course, are headquartered here in Oregon, and there were 3 individuals who we would be working with, and I think many of you may know these individuals, as we have worked with OSBA in the past on other things, and they are all here in Oregon as well, and are probably very acutely aware of our district. The last one is Ray and Associates, and they are headquartered in Iowa, and they did not list any contacts. They had a number of people listed, but none that were specifically assigned to work with us. And of the people that they listed, all of them were in faraway states. I believe the closest was Arizona. So that is, those are the 4 companies that we have. Todd, could you go to the next slide? I think we probably will want to spend some time on this. I noticed that the process and the timeline for each of the 4 proposals was actually very similar. They did have some nuances in each of these, and I just try to spell them out in a very generic fashion. But in essence, almost every company had 5 stages of assistance that they would walk a board through. The first kind of our input phase, meet with the board, establish a timeline, etc. The second stage was to meet with stakeholders within a community and help us facilitate that, as well as begin the advertising process. The third was their side, which is the recruitment and then screening of the applicants. And then 4th stage was obviously the interviews and helping us walk through that process. And then the 5th stage was the selection and rejection of candidates. And then we noticed that most of them were very poignant about their willingness to help us establish superintendent goals and begin the process. Todd, can you go to the next slide, please? So I did find this interesting. I was just looking to see how many placements each of the companies had made in the last 5 years based on what they sent us. And you can just see those numbers there. So GR Recruiting seems to be the smallest company. They had only 13 placements that they listed. I don't know if there's more. That's all that was in the handout. McPherson and Jacobson had over 300. I quit counting after a while because there were so many, but it was well over 300. OSBA has placed 59 superintendents. I did note that many of them were interim superintendents, and that they also had a number of districts that they were helping within the same 5-year period of time. So I would take that number with a grain of salt. And then lastly was Ray and Associates. They had 34 superintendents placed that they listed over the last 5 years. I will just say before we go on, I have included this email in your packet. I took it upon myself to email their references. So I emailed a number of individuals that each of the companies listed as a reference. I only had 1 response, so I didn't expect a lot, but I was hoping for more. This individual, I've included his email response to us. He used Ray and Associates. He was the only one to respond to my inquiries. And his email was, I think, helpful in the sense that it provides some overview for their experience and what a board should look for, as well as talking about his experience with that company. as I said, I did email a number of individuals from each of the companies, and he was the only one that responded. So I was trying to do a little bit more homework and see if we could garner some more information on the experience that other districts have had. But we only had one response. So, Todd, could you go to the next slide, please? Lastly, or not lastly, but I did break it down by cost. So each of the companies listed a base cost as well as their expenses, and then some of them provided a maximum cost and others just provided an estimated total. And I would just take this with a grain of salt. All of them said that, you know, based on what we wanted to do and visits and interviews and travel, that the cost could vary. But I think the base cost is, it just gives us a good estimate of what we're looking at, and then the total cost there. So it could run us anywhere from $12,000 to $20,000 depending on the company that we pick, and everybody seemed to kind of fall in that ballpark. So next slide, Todd. And then the guarantee, and I noticed that all of them had the same guarantee. So they guarantee that if things don't work out, if the superintendent was to leave for almost any reason, they would be more than happy to come back and waive their base fee and help us in a recruitment for a new superintendent if things don't work out. And every company was willing to do that. So I think.
Did some had better workmanship afterwards in their guarantee, right? That some were more interim and helping.
Yeah, so, and those are some of the
Create the
details that I think
relationship.
we should kind of hash out tonight, but yes, so one of the companies seemed to be very involved for almost 2 years afterwards. They would come back and continue to visit with the district and the superintendent and make sure that things were going well, and others just seem to be, we'll provide an online survey and you know, you can take it with a grain of salt from there. So I think that is some of the nuances that we should talk about tonight. Todd, I think that was really the last slide. The rest is just to bring up, so our questions, you know, so we have 5 questions that we need to answer. And so I'm happy to open up to the board and talk about your thoughts about each of the companies or to ask questions. But that's just a quick overall summary of the 4 RFPs that we've received thus far.
So I had 3 questions that came up reviewing this. There were some companies that work on a board consensus idea of what they want, what we want a superintendent to look like. And then there's at least one that only does individual interviews with board members and doesn't bring us together on a consensus basis. So I think that's something maybe we can talk about.
Do you remember which company was that? Because I think that they will do whatever the board asks them to do.
And I thought that's probably the case, but I thought, I don't know what our board wants in this situation.
Do you remember who was what?
So I think it was Ray that does the individual board members.
I think more than one stated that they would interview individually. Also.
Well, I'll just share some of my thoughts and feelings as I read through each of these. It sounded like the process was very similar and that the board has a fair amount of leeway to ask for various things. Like if we feel like we need something from them, that they sounded to be willing to do that. For me, it really came down to who is local, who knows us, who knows our situation, who has some sense of what Southern Oregon is like. How do we find the right candidate to fit for us in our area and our unique needs? And I think as a board, understanding and knowing what we want out of a superintendent, what are the characteristics that are going to be most important for us, and being able to explain that well to whoever these lead investigators are that come to work with us is going to be key. And I think having people who understand, the situation here and what we're facing is going to be very helpful. So from that perspective, I looked at, for example, Ray and Associates. They didn't seem to have anybody local. The email that we received from the gentleman was about that company and very complimentary of that company as far as their work. But I noted that he is also from Omaha, Nebraska, and Ray and Associates is a Midwestern company, and so they kind of know the area a little bit better. But that seemed to be a very important piece, was having people who the board can work with well, and then really to be able to provide some of that local knowledge to help direct the board, and really to direct the candidates who come to be able to screen them appropriately and say, this is going to be a great fit for you, or this isn't going to be a great fit for you. I don't know if anybody else had any thoughts as you were going through that, but that for me was kind of stood out because the process seemed to be about the same.
What stood out to me in, for example, McPherson and Jacobson was right off the bat, they're talking about the kids and the history of success. That was a very strong opening statement that was above and beyond others companies that they were talking about what's best for the kids. I know all of them included something about diversity and inclusion and selecting someone that has diverse background, so to speak, and is sensitive to those things. But this was the only company I saw that was really coming out of the gate right at the beginning, emphasizing the kids. That gave them extra points for me compared to others. Sure. I know the price breakdown, one of these companies was almost twice the amount of the lowest bid company, so to speak. And I don't think price is as big of a determining factor. We've allowed up to 15 points on one of these for the talking about the finances and the fees and compensation and structure. Actually, it's 20.
Because I'm not remembering, I'm not seeing it in my notes. They're all available.
They're all available.
Their availability to work with us is
Yeah,
in the time frame that they,
in our, yeah.
yes.
yeah, and the timeline, most of them put a timeline in, and they wanted to get going in November. So, and I think that, this is the time, if you're looking to hire in July, we do need to start that process relatively quickly. So,
I will say it. I'll find the company before that was a little distracting and negative for me to hear, and that was the burden was back on us to even do a lot of the search criteria, and that didn't make sense to me or bode very well.
It's probably OSB.
OSBA, yeah, we're basically saying, hey, we're gonna put this burden right back on the school board. And I get it that in the end, we are making the ultimate decision. We're gonna be interviewing the top candidates. That did not feel very good to me from the OSB's proposal. That stood out as a negative for their RFP. And I thought that there was, I just put, my short comments was there was no meat or substance in number 2. The insightfulness, this is question 1, question 2. For me, I just didn't see meat or substance there on the OSBA, but that's just my take on it.
Any other thoughts or questions on any of the companies?
Well, I was looking through OSBA thinking, I had that feeling that they were putting a lot of the research and checking out references, stuff back on us versus them doing it also, but I don't see that right offhand. Number 2, the insightfulness and quality of responses to the school board's request for information. You know, I had to read it 2 or 3 times before I realized page 8 and 9 and 10 directly address every one of the items we put out in our RFP, and they were the only ones that did that. So I thought, I didn't catch that the first or second time through, but I caught it through the last time I read
The
it.
OSBA.
Yeah. OSBA.
OSBA put in what that the others didn't,
Well, so
They
we,
answered the 5 questions.
that we, yeah.
yeah, we have on this proposed superintendent search process.
Yeah.
And, basically 10 different questions. And OSBA was the only one who
Spelled them
actually,
out like that.
Yeah,
actually filled it out like that and addressed every one of them. They may not have given the answer we were looking for, but they addressed every one of the questions.
They
So I
do.
thought,
If you look at the bottom of page 9 on OSBA, that's where it talks about what you and I both have mentioned, and that's the search process. Number 6, answer. The short answer is that the search process generally takes very little of the staff's time. The work of the search process is largely an activity for the board. That was not what I wanted to hear. The selection process is largely an activity of the board.
so,
McPherson and Jacobson, what I appreciated was they listed out all of the things that they're going to do, but they also listed out the things that the school district should do.
Yes.
And I thought that that was very helpful for me to look to see, okay, so they have spelled out, here's our process, here's what we're gonna do, here's where we need your assistance. And so everybody kind of knows their role and responsibilities. And I agree, as I read OSBA, it was more like, you tell us what you want and then we'll do whatever. And so it was just nice to see, here's a listing for me of things that we're gonna take care of for you, and then here's where we need your help to make you successful. And so that was encouraging for them.
Yes, it is.
I like that also. I looked at the 3 OSBA candidates for our team, and you mentioned that we should probably know them. I don't. Does somebody else have some insights on them?
Steve Kelly is one, am I correct?
Yes.
I think, yeah, Steve Kelly, I've worked with him on the superintendent review for 2 years now. And you would know him probably from the conferences. He's a very tall, lanky, pale man. He was the superintendent for Sutherland, I think, somewhere locally closer to than not, I think. And- South Umpqua? Okay, yeah. Who's the second one?
Sarah,
Person,
Sarah Erb?
Milt, yeah, I know Milt Dennison has a very
Yeah.
lengthy.
Steve's amazing to work with. In the past. Steve Kelly.
Yeah.
From OSBA. I don't know any of the others.
You know Milt Dennison by chance?
I know Steve Kelly. I don't know the one you just said, I don't think. What was it again?
Milt Dennison,
Where's that?
he's the 3rd one that's been a superintendent at Clackamas, Canby,
No,
Columbia Gorge.
no, I don't have any.
How about Sarah Erb, HERB?
since she's relatively new.
She did look good.
She's been there 5 years.
That's relatively new.
Is South Umpqua, Myrtle Creek, or Dry Cities, or
Yeah, Douglas County.
I actually attended one of their selection.
Oh, really?
Yeah, one of their selections as just curious, wanted to see how it worked. I was thinking I might apply for a job doing that. You know, but, and it was when the lady was in charge, what was her name? I forget, but anyway, she was very nice to let me audit the class. And that's, I think, when I first met Steve Kelly, I'm not sure. But I don't know anybody else.
If I could comment on Ray and Associates. Was not very pleased with the presentation of what they gave us. It's just no division, no, and just a long, just basically listing everything, exhausted list that bored me right out of the gate. I thought it was lengthy and it seems distant to me the way I took Ray and Associates. Now, reading this is the only reply you got back, correct? Chair Nelson, was about Ray and Associates, and I haven't been able to quite get through it, but I assume that they are praising them, correct?
Yeah, they were, so in the email, he was, this man who responded was very affable. I mean, he got back to me within 10 minutes of me sending the email. No one else did, as I said. I think he pointed out a couple of things that I think are important for us to just think about. He said that the individuals that they work with, more so than the company, was the critical factor. He said them knowing the area and being able to walk the board through was very important. And so that was one of the first things that he said, was it's not so much the company as it is who's coming to help you. Because he said they're basically all the same. And I think we've seen that as we look through these presentations.
Yeah, consistent.
Yeah. Let's see. The other thing that he said is it's very important for the board to make sure that the board has a clear understanding of what they're looking for and that they're able to articulate that to the search company. So, you know, what we're looking for, we have to be able as a board to speak in a kind of a unified voice. And so that's an important aspect to all of this. Anyway, I'll just let you read through the rest of it. So he was very positive about that company. I agree, as I read through their packet of information and looked at their price and what they were offering, I wasn't overly impressed that that was the best company, just given the information that we had.
For the highest price.
Right.
I think that the people that actually you get assigned to work with, and what this guy says,
Yeah.
matters more to the process than how good somebody is at putting together a proposal. Unfortunately, this is what we get to look at. We don't really know anything about the people we assigned to work with.
Well, you know a little. So you had, for example, McPherson and Jacobson, they put Dr. Nelson's bio in there and you could read through that. And then one of the other GR Recruiting had the bios for the two ladies who would be assigned to work with us here. And then we know OSBA. So really it was Ray and Associates that we don't know anything about who would come. So you're right, we don't know them, but at least we have their resume listed for some.
I've seen some amazing resumes with really different people on the other side of them.
I had a question for McPherson and Jacobson. On page 21, the very last, biggest mistake a board can make at the final stages. I don't know why I'm still interpreting this either the wrong way or incorrectly. Make sure the candidate you are hiring is the best fit for your district. That's the biggest mistake a board can make at the final stages. What am I missing here?
If you know you shouldn't marry the guy, you shouldn't.
Well, because you can have someone who comes and interviews really well.
See,
and
two bites.
impresses you, but doesn't really fit with what you
Experience.
initially said. Like if we're looking for someone who's collaborative and who's whatever, and then we have someone who just interviews well, but doesn't really fit what we think we want when we start. And I have walked through this process many times in my own work as we hire various professionals and interview people. And some people interview great and they turn out to be fired within 2 months. We're like, goodbye. And I've seen that happen more than once. And it's always frustrating to go through the whole process and then not get what you think you're getting. And Gary's right, we really don't know who these people are. Ironically enough, I just received another email from one of my people and this is about GR recruiting, so a different company. And so this is the board chair up in Shoreline School District. I'll just read it to you. It said, we worked with Jim at GR Recruiting. Jim was an incredible resource to our board, and I recommend him and his team highly. He was patient, his process was clear and community driven, and we landed with 3 exceptional options for our search. Our board is very pleased. So.
I was interested with their package talking about K-12 Insight. Does that ring a bell for anybody? If anyone's familiar with that, that is something that is unique compared to the other.
Which one?
We're talking about GR
Okay.
recruiting, and they talk about K-12 Insight being utilized.
K-12 Insight is basically, back when we had Orca, Oregon Connections Academy, they were a K-12 Insight public charter school. And so they have proprietary online courseware. There's a lot of it out there. A lot of it's evolved since, but K-12 was one of the original, and they're actually a national company who specializes in charter school implementation within the public realm, basically creating public charter schools.
So what would be the point of them putting that in there?
That's a great question.
I
I think what it is depending on, they're going to appeal to as many different facets of things the board might consider. A board might consider, because public charters have popped up quite a bit lately across the nation and as well as the state of Oregon. So it might be, if there was an inkling of the board that was looking at a public charter, that experience with K-12 may appeal to the board in their proposal.
It says after the search, your district can expect exceptional support from our firm and from our partnership with K-12 Insight and throughout the process.
Okay.
This comes in the form of useful data and improved communication with stakeholders and parents. One of the things that I didn't feel comfortable completely with GR is they sub out community engagement. So I just wondered if that would dilute, like what we tell them we want, and then they tell, if it just adds one more person to the kindergarten telephone game. The other ones seem to, the people we would work with would do that. But
What page was that? I didn't pick up.
consensus, of course, that's one I didn't like the page number. I'll find it.
They did have some good, at least pictures and bios there that helped see who we're potentially could work with, I guess. So I think we're gonna work with all of them.
So if this is GR, so they said that we would work with Darlene Schottel.
The last
She's
one, oh, okay.
Medford.
She's in Medford, and Christine McDuffie would be the lead associate that we would work with. So those were the two that listed. On page 13, it says, assess constituent concerns and preferences utilizing our firm's 28-item research-based survey, which is available in a variety of languages. If desired, we will provide in-person, virtual, or a combination of both for meetings with predetermined groups of people to interact with them on characteristics that are vital for the position profile. So it didn't, I think that they would use both. At least that's what I read when I was looking through it.
I got the impression, reading through these, that, I think probably all of them, including OSBA, have a list of possible candidates that they have interviewed and they've got bios on, and qualities that they've checked out. And then it's a matter of any of them match up with the board and community and staff qualities that the district seems to be looking for.
It's a very expensive dating service is what this is.
Yes, that's the impression.
So on page 14, it says the process, the last bullet point is their recruiting has a unique partnership with the nationally recognized company K-12 Insight, specializes in solutions for community engagement, online surveys, customer service for schools, and school communication. This data provides the board valuable and community input during the search process, as well as valuable information that can enhance. So maybe I the partner. That was a more direct spot.
Have we ever partnered with them before? K-12?
No, I was just looking at K-12 Insight and I was thinking of there's another company, K-12, that does the charter site. K-12 Insight is more about data and they'll do some community engagement and then some data work. So it's a very different piece that we're not familiar with at all. And I don't know of any other districts that are talking about using that.
So if, have we ever hired a company to help us in the superintendent process before?
No, never had to.
That was my impression, but I wasn't sure.
Actually, first superintendent that came on after I came on, I got a phone call from a local man and said, if you don't look at Kerm Bennett, you're making a big mistake. And I said, really? And so I found out he had applied and we hired him. You know, it's just, sometimes things fall together and sometimes they don't. It doesn't always have to be formal, but maybe it should be formal. I mean, you know, I don't have any answers. I don't have any experience not hiring. I can tell you why John Higgins was here too. That was another board member recruited him. So, you know, we recruit, we can do it. We've got people on this campus right here that are eligible.
And it talks about internal and external search and that they're trying to go after both. Some of these companies, a couple did at least, talk about the internal and external. But they're not just bringing them in from the outside, they're also looking at the inside.
Yeah, Debbie, I have limitations that I need to share with the rest of the board because I don't get to see you all the time. And I have been a little under the weather and I think I'm much better now, but I have some very strong beliefs about what we're capable of doing on our own here in Grants Pass, River City. And I'm very proud of what's happened in the past. We've never made a mistake. We have never made a mistake, including Kirk. We have never made a mistake. And I don't think we ever will. But I'm not going to be here much longer. I'm in my last term. I can retire anytime. I'm getting encouraged by Mickey Jarvis, who's somebody that I've never even met, but I admire because of her reputation. And she thinks I need to maybe start looking for retirement. And she's entitled to that opinion. I don't agree with her, but I respect her. So I think I have to be careful not to lead any of the 6 other board members down Cliff's path, because Cliff has limitations. You know, there are people who don't want me here anymore. And not many, but so far, Mickey Jarvis doesn't. So, I mean, she's very key. I like Kirk. I mean, yeah, I'm not the best one to consult with for the next 10, 20 years, I'm not gonna be here. And all I can do is give you the benefit of my experience, which I'm very proud of. And I did serve as president of OSBA, served well, brought a lot of attention to Grants Pass and Kerm Bennett, some attention he didn't even like because it cost him $5,000 to go up and entertain the OSBA convention, but he did it with a smile, a little glint in his eye. I think that you look for things in people that you're not going to necessarily get out of a catalog. You've got to meet people. And you've got to also have a meeting of the minds of the 7. We have to all agree. If we're on our toes, we will do that. We will end up agreeing. So, I mean, these are things that I believe in. And so I'm going to kind of limit I want to do everything you want me to, and I won't shirk my work, but I'm not going to be here that long. So I just think the next choice you make is going to go just as long as Kirk did. You know, I mean, Kirk's done 5 years of yeoman work, and he'll go, the next one will go 5, he might even go 6, or he might go 4, I don't know. But we've been very, very successful in our leadership. And it's not just the superintendent, it's the admin team. All those people on his admin team are capable of doing his job. I was told that before we hired him to do the job. They could all do it. 6 of them could do it. And John Higgins told me that. So I don't think we want to ignore those around us, people around us. I don't want to lose Kirk. I'll just tell you that going right up front, I like Kirk a lot. And I don't think it said I owe him something. I just like him. I like him. I think he's good for the district. I think people like him. Mickey Jarvis likes him, I know, because she had a chance to complain, but she didn't. So when people have really liked Kirk until just the pandemic just kind of exploded, and I blame pandemic and politics for all this stuff that we're going through. And I've just got to tell you, that troubles me, that we have to change our course of action because we're going through a pandemic and maybe it's changing things, but we don't know how long it's going to last. So what do? Give it our best shot. And that's what we'll do. And we have such a great board and diversified as can be, experienced, even though some are new, they jumped right into it full bore. Nobody that doesn't do 150% of their work. So I just want to share that with you because it qualifies me as what you might think I am, and I'm not right now. I can't be that right now. I will be 88 next year. I'm not a spring chicken, but I do have a brain, and that's why I can share these things, and I know that it's important to share these things. And I'll work with you guys as long as you let me. But I gotta please other people too, out there on the campus, and whoever you select, and I'll help you, will be somebody that wants me to stay on the board. So when you think about that, you know, I might be a sacrificial lamb. I'd do it, I think. To get the right person, I'd do it. I've been here long enough, I can step down, get the right person, and I think you will if you go after them. I think you'll be very pleased. And I like the formal process because that's where you start. You get everything to start, get it all out on the table, see what you want to do. And I'm listening. That's all I have to say right now.
Do we just take one at a time and say pro and con, or do we want to go through the questions?
So I think we can go through the questions. I'm not sure if there's a legal requirement, if we're supposed to answer this individually and not talk about what our scores are. If we want to talk about it as a board and then just fill out the scores as, we don't have to tell what we would score and just, I don't know.
There is not. However you end up filling these rubrics out is completely up to you, but Sherry described the process ultimately being objective in the end, that your scores put together out of 700 points will determine the outcome. So whether you've already put them in based on what you've done, or you have discussion and put those numbers in. And I think in the end, we can have Tony compile them.
I have a spreadsheet.
I can assist with the board as well.
We only have 14 minutes.
So do we have any kind of timeline?
Well, we would like to select them tonight,
14 minutes.
so.
I did email Kristen and let her know that we'll probably be a little late.
I'll just let Tanya put mine in now. I already filled mine out, so let's get to it, everybody.
I pre-filled mine last night, and I think we've talked about things. I'm not gonna probably change my scoring either.
Yeah, I have not filled mine out, but I'm very happy to write my own scores, and I know I have 2 companies that I would be happy with either one, and 2 that I hope we don't select, and I suspect we're all on the same page. So for me, I think I'm happy to just vote unless we want to, or I'll fill my scores out unless we want more discussion.
I know, so we have to, it has to go by this.
We do have,
Yes.
we do have 2 individuals, Todd, is that correct, that want to speak to this action item? So before we turn our scores in and finish all the filling out of forms, why don't you give them their 3 minutes and we'll listen to what they have to say.
Okay, I know we have one for sure. The other person is one of the iPhones and I don't know which one it is, so they need to rename themselves and let me know if they still want to. Indra, I'm gonna go ahead and ask you to unmute. And then I'll put the timer up there and you have 3 minutes.
Indra, if you're talking, we can't hear you. Are you muted?
You've got to unmute yourself, Indra. Okay, Indra, looks like your microphone's unmuted, so go for it.
She's on the iPhone. And she has- Top left, there's a speaker button. She probably needs to push.
Todd, why don't we go to the other one and we can come back to Indra and hopefully she can figure out her mute issues.
Okay. Again, the other one is one of the multiple iPhones and I can't tell which one that is. So unless I can get that person to change their name and let me know who that is, I really don't have a way to unmute them. And Indra, your microphone is unmuted, so if you can talk to us, we can hear you. It looks like Indra might be having some technology problems. She can message me, but there's no.
Can you message her back and tell her on the top left-hand corner of the iPhone, there's a little speaker button. She probably needs to push it. We give Zoom classes at the salon to the elderly.
We need to fill these out tonight for these companies. You want me to?
Go out for me.
Well, it looks like she's trying to unmute herself, even though here it says that
Help
you
you, I
are.
won't fill them out for you, but
Yeah.
you understand what we're doing here.
Well, I think I understand, but it's moving faster than I hoped. So I don't want to be in the way.
Indra, if we can't communicate with this, you can also take it in writing. And that's also true for the other iPhone person who is remained iPhone. And if you want to send that to us, I'll put that in the chat and you can email that to us.
Andrew says she's waiting for the host to let her in.
Okay, I think you guys can go ahead and proceed then.
Todd, it sounds like Indra may have left the meeting and is trying to get back in. Cassie, I don't know if you get a text that
Yeah.
she's trying to do that.
So she might be on, she's got one device that is unmuted right now, so she's coming back in on an iPhone maybe.
Waiting for host to let me in, disconnected on iPhone.
Yeah, I let her in. I'll just ask both iPhones to unmute, I guess.
Hello?
We can hear you.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, so I'm gonna start. Well, thank you all for your time and effort in this. It's a really obviously big decision. I guess I want to start off now by saying, I hope that I get that Zoom is convenient and easy, but due to complications, I really encourage you all to in future have in-person meetings. I don't know why it went back to Zoom for this special meeting, but it's difficult to hear things happen. Like now, half the things I couldn't even, I mean, not half, but a small percentage, it's mumbly. I could hear papers shuffling super loud. So I really hope we could do this in person, because this is a huge decision. You're elected officials representing us, students, community members, faculty, staff, parents. And so I feel like we should really be a big part of this whole process. And I feel like the transparency already is gone. I'm very confused and in the dark, because I don't know if you got info packets or you're just speaking off the cuff. I can't even tell, but it would be nice that we got those info packets too, so we could follow along with the process and have comments and suggestions to let you all know. So I would encourage that. And then I do encourage you, I mean, it is a lot of money, but I bet that you spend more money on a weekend or 4-day seminar for administrators or teachers than this hiring a superintendent, which is a huge decision. And I think time-wise would be much more efficient. So I encourage you to spend the money to get the formal process and the company, if that's what you're already deciding. I really can't tell. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Indra.
Scott, are we allowed to share those proposals, or is that something that we needed to keep confidential for this?
I think the proposals can be shared. I think the RFP is a public document. I think the proposals, once they're submitted, become public documents. So there's no problem with attaching those, reattaching them to the agenda, and resending the agenda so people can have access to the proposals. That's a non-issue. I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Todd, was there anyone else?
I think Indra was on her iPhone and in another computer, so I think that was both of them. So I think we're good to go.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, any other comments then before we move on to our action item 3.0? Debbie, you had raised your hand. Did you have something else, or?
Well, I just mentioned to Todd an example of looking for the best fit. You know, I'm aware of a situation where we hired a principal, that outstanding individual. We were excited about the qualities and skills that he brought. But he really wasn't the right fit because he really needed a bigger, more urban district than a small rural. And so that was a matter of thinking, you know, we really wanted those talents, but we weren't quite ready to have them. So it wasn't the right fit.
All right, has everybody turned in their papers that wishes to do, Debbie, are you still filling yours out?
I'm still.
That's fine, that's fine.
Chair Nelson, I just have a comment from Sherry online that if there's proprietary information stated in the proposal, then that can't be shared out publicly. So there are some restrictions.
Okay.
My take on it is, no matter who gets, who we action item to take this bid, I can only assume that these 4 companies would be able to go after some of the same candidates. Therefore, in the end, we're getting the cream of the crop. That would be the same cream of the crop from each of the companies. I have confidence no matter who gets awarded this bid. And for the money, which is a very small amount of money, all things considered, for how many people are involved and the time involved, it's a very small drop in the bucket. $12,000.
Yeah, our traffic study was 3 times that. So that involved putting out some people and counting cars. So, yeah, it's, I mean, I think the deal, I mean, I certainly did not select based on price. We were looking after the company that I think, for me, honestly, has some local flavor and will be the company that will do the best at helping the community feel heard as we go through this process. I think that's really what we need to focus on here as we move through this. Okay, I think Tanya is still tallying, so we'll just go on. We have future meeting dates and suggested agenda items. We have our special board meeting on the 30th. And our next formal board meeting will be on December 14th. Any questions or concerns on those?
Do we have time for board reports and special concerns, or?
It's not on the agenda, so it should probably not be discussed tonight.
It's not enough public notice.
Oh, we're not taking any action.
We are taking one action.
Well, I mean, any action on board reports and special concerns.
I think we've had enough. We've had enough.
We can't amend the agenda. Well,
Yeah, I think we've had enough issues with our agendas and following the legalities that I think we should just, we'll wait until the next meeting. It's not on the agenda, so I don't want to put that there. Like, I don't want people to accuse us of changing the agenda for.
Just
Okay.
to be clear, I believe that if we choose to put another topic on the agenda, we could.
Technically, I understand that it just requires a motion. Second. That's how it would happen. What we've done in the
As
past.
long as we're not falling outside of our public meeting laws, I don't have any problems with that. So, but typically, if it's not been on the agenda for 24 hours, we should not be discussing it here.
Maybe we have any other then?
Yes, I do. Sorry to be so behind on this
Just give me
topic.
ones that you have done.
So,
I would just make a point that 2.0 is board reports and special concerns. So however the board wants to interpret that, it typically past practice has been left open for the boards to make reports.
There you go.
Special- I just caught that.
The
So
simplest
sorry
thing
for
ever
that.
made.
Brian, it's on
I
the
had
board.
some assistance
Agenda,
from my
so-
directors
because I
going, Kurt,
Clearly didn't.
2.0 says that, so it was my director team after did.
Good catch.
We all missed that.
Brian, you have a comment on board reports and special concern.
Yeah. Well, I know that there was a pretty significant student walkouts today at some of our schools, and there was a pretty significant protest outside our board meeting tonight, and myself and Gary and Cliff were nice enough to go out and talk with them a little bit. And one thing that came out of that conversation is that there's a subset of our student body that is not feeling very comfortable with where things are at after what has transpired recently. And they asked Gary and myself, Cliff wasn't there yet, but they asked Gary and I if the board would be willing to put together some sort of statement of support for LGBTQ students. They're not feeling supported right now, and I was amenable to that, and it sounded like out there Gary was amenable to that. So I just wanted to bring that up since it was a timely topic that just happened, and it sounds important to our students. So
Don't we have policies in place
for what?
that support?
Well, I think it's more they're looking for the people that are in this room to voice support personally.
I guess I put it as essentially just to reaffirm that District 7 supports all of our students, including the LGBTQ students. So have the board say that we support those students, and decision as some kind of way it's that I would like to say that no, we from those students and have no problem with that.
I'd like to see the wording first. And what, do you have an idea?
Oh, I don't know. We were just talking outside about it, so I don't have anything in mind per se, but I just kind of wanted to get a temperature of the board for doing something like that to show support for the students. So I was just looking for people's thoughts and opinions.
I'd be with you on it.
Be amenable to it if it included all students and not just a specific population. The wording is important to me,
Sure.
Debbie, your thoughts?
inclusion versus exclusion.
What exactly are they asking for again?
Well, as I recall, there's a certain subset of our student population that is feeling unsupported after the recent board decision regarding the 2 employees. And their request was to have a statement of support from the board to affirm that we support LGBTQ students just as much as we support the rest of the student body, just to show that the decision made was not to lessen their standing, I guess. I'm just winging it here. So
I think that's correct. They were attempting to paint the decision the board made as lessening those students' standing. And I said, my position is that that decision we made had nothing to do with saying anything about those students, and I would certainly be in favor of affirming that District 7 supports the LGBTQ students. So that nothing about our decision related to that.
In your opinion.
Sure.
And I am certainly supportive of that community and all the other communities. So I can certainly affirm that.
I'm not sure I heard that.
Well, I think she was just responding to Brian's question, which you said you were in agreement with as well.
Yeah, I guess I'm just one of, or we were 2 of 7, and each person can chime in or abstain. There's that word again.
Well, I certainly feel that we have a subset of our student population that is felt marginalized based on decision of the board. And I'm certainly in agreement to make a statement. I would also put forward, though, that there are other students who feel marginalized. And I think that I have no problems making a statement that we support LGBTQ rights and their abilities to feel safe and protected at school. I would also ask and maybe push that we put all students, whether they be Hispanic, Latino, African-American, Asian. I have had a number of people reach out to me over the last 3 years that I've been on the board who have concerns about lots of segments of marginalized students for one reason or another, based on their religious beliefs or the color of their skin or whatever. And I think that we need to continue to affirm that as a school board, we feel strongly that all students are protected when they come here and they can receive a good education. And so be happy to put LGBTQ first, because I think they're the ones who feel the most marginalized at this point in time. But I think that the statements need to be inclusive of all of our subpopulations as well, because I think there's a lot of kids and students who feel that they're not heard as well as they need to be heard. I would also state that I think that by and large, our teachers and our staff do a great job of trying to reach out and be supportive. I have appreciated that. I think we could do and continue to do a better job at that. But yeah, I'm all in favor of making some statement. I don't know if your statement wants to include that the decision was not against religion, and that it wasn't for or against rights of freedom of speech. I think most of you voted because you felt that the actions were not commensurate with the crime, so to speak. So I don't know if we want to, I don't know how far you want to take this. We did not make any large statements after we finished. I would caution us against maybe going too far, but I think that there's a lot of places that we could go, but certainly a statement that says we support the students and their right to have a safe and excellent education is appropriate from the board.
Where does the word tolerance maybe work? There, I think we need to be tolerant of one another, all of us.
I think we need to be more than tolerant. I think we need to be kind and loving. to one
Kind and
another.
loving.
Tolerant
would
just
be in
means
the
we'll put
list.
up with one another.
Yeah, that's part of it.
And we need to do better than that.
Yeah, we do. We need to be better than anybody that we know, because we can be. We could be more loving than anybody. And some people don't like to use that word.
So Brian, would you like to craft a statement and bring it back to the board?
That wasn't my hope.
No.
I was hoping that I don't want to put it off on anyone else, as this is just something that came up tonight, but I mean, I'm happy to take a crack at it and then forward it to the board chair or to Kirk, or, you know, and then it can go through a revision or whatever.
Well, actually, the statement put out by Superintendent Cole immediately following the meeting actually has a pretty good.
It says we recognize today's decision by the Board of Education may bring about a variety of emotions for our staff, students, and families. I want to reiterate that Grants Pass School District 7 will continue to follow all state and federal laws. We have school board policies in place to support safe environments for students and staff. We will continue protecting the well-being of everyone in our schools, regardless of race, religion, gender, sex, sexual orientation, or ability. We all belong in Grants Pass School District 7.
That's great. Good job, Kirk. What about the board?
Will you sign that?
I
Well,
like those wordings.
so, and I would say what I heard out there, the complaint was that the board said nothing essentially after we made a decision. And that caused them to feel marginalized. And so her statement was well said. And the board, I would be in favor of affirming that.
I would be in favor of something consistent with that message. Doesn't have to be verbatim, but close to it. Inclusive and not at the expense of any group.
Well, Brian, you want to use that as a template and you can bring something back and we'll.
Did this go
we
to
can-
families? Essentially is our the statement.
It's a statement from the superintendent. And I think what people are looking for is a statement from the board because they're associating the recent board decision. And so, I really think they want to hear from the board.
I'm happy to use that as a starting point, and then at the next board meeting, we can discuss it again.
Yeah, we got 2 weeks. Why don't we'll work on it. You can send it to me. We can share it amongst the board and we can vote on it on the next meeting. And put it out as an official statement from the board.
I think we should run it through legal.
We can. I think if it's a very generic statement that we support people, I think that will clearly do it. It better clear.
This place, it'll work. Something.
All right, let's, are there any other board reports and special concerns before we hop back down to item 3.0 on our agenda? Because we have the official results. We have to vote on this. or is it,
Results are in?
I
Results
think
by-
you gotta vote to approve one of the 4 RFPs.
Okay, so we have had the submissions. Here are the totals. OSBA scored 292 points. McPherson and Jacobson scored 552 points. GR Recruiting scored 378 points. Reagan Associates scored 220 points. So the clear winner by well over 150 points was McPherson and Jacobson as selected by the Cliff, we'll ask you to abstain from the vote since you didn't turn your forms in, which is fine. But
I would like to abstain if it's allowed.
It is allowed. We have
Thank you.
learned that the hard way. It is allowed to abstain.
Round and round.
So, we need a motion to approve McPherson and Jacobson as our consultant and search firm.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. Tanya, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Member Green,
Yes.
Member Neville,
Yes.
Member Brownell,
Yes,
Member Nelson,
Yes.
Member Coolman will abstain.
Yeah.
Member Wilkins,
Yes.
Member Richardson.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The motion carries. We will adjourn our special session or board meeting this evening and we'll take 3 minutes and then we'll reopen for our